Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Landlord Information Evening. For those who I haven't met yet, my name is Emma Title. I run the Rent Guarantee Scheme here at Reading Borough Council. So it's such a pleasure to see so many of you here this evening, lots and lots of familiar faces and some new ones as well. I've got some very quick housekeeping announcements just before we begin properly. Firstly, the nearest toilets are back out the double doors where you came in, down the corridor on the left-hand side. Secondly, if the fire alarm goes off this evening, it's not going to be a drill, and the quickest way out of this room is through the door just here at the back. Our assembly point is on the corner of Fobney Street, which is over on the left-hand side of the Civic Offices. To get us started properly, it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Yeo, who is our lead councillor for housing here at Reading Borough Council.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me? I can only hear myself. So I'm not going to stand up because if I do, I'll be too far away from the microphone, I think, having done a number of council meetings like this. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming this evening. As Emma says, welcome to this year's Landlord Information Evening. There wasn't one last year, so you didn't get to see me then when I was first lead councillor from last May. So I'm Matt Yeo, I'm the lead councillor for housing here at Reading. Hopefully you've had a chance to talk to some of the officers before we hear this evening's talks at some of the stands in the other room. So as far as I'm aware, Reading has worked in close partnership with the private rented sector for many years, recognising the essential role that you as landlords play in providing safe, secure homes. More than 1 in 3 of Reading's residents are private renters, and so it's vital that we continue to work together to achieve our mutual goals. Stable tenancies and good quality properties where tenants can live well. As I'm probably sure that pretty much all of you are aware, the Renters' Rights Bill, which became law earlier this week, will transform England's rental landscape. We're glad to work in partnership with the NRLA, National Residential Landlords Association, who have been instrumental in the bill's development, and we're looking forward to hearing the latest from James Gladwin in a few minutes. We're committed to working closely with landlords throughout this change. We welcome your feedback and thoughts on all aspects of our services. Reading is committed to driving up standards in the private rented sector and ensuring that all tenants live in safe homes. We know that maintaining your property in the best condition is important to you, and our second speaker this evening, Michael Pryor, will be tackling the subject of damp and mould in the rented sector and how to prevent it. Also how to treat it when it occurs and how to help your tenants manage moisture in their homes. And we as a council are also having to consider all of this as a landlord ourselves. So this event is run each year, or most years that we've run it, by our rent guarantee scheme, which offers landlords the security of guaranteed rent and a guaranteed deposit, as well as ongoing support throughout each tenancy. The scheme helps some of our most vulnerable residents to find secure housing. We're grateful for the hundreds of landlords like myself who already provide more than 750 homes via the scheme. But rented accommodation remains in high demand in Reading, and we are keen to take on more properties with generous incentives. So I would encourage you to speak with the team and see what they offer, what they can offer. Thank you again for your time and support this evening. So we look forward to a productive evening of discussion, learning and collaboration, and I'll hand back to Emma for the next section.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Yeo. So, as Councillor Yeo said, for many years we've worked in partnership with the National Residential Landlords Association, and we've got James come to speak to us this evening about what the future looks like for the private rented sector. And of course, we've been promised the Renters' Rights Bill for, I think it's about 5 years, and probably by about 4 Prime Ministers now. But it received royal assent on Monday, and so it very much feels like that future is now. I know you're going to be really interested to hear what James has to say, so without further ado, James.
Thank you, Emma. And thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Good stuff. Right, I've got a terrible habit of talking very quickly, so if I am, put your hands up and tell me. First to introduce myself, I'm James Gladwin. I'm one of the regional engagement executives here at the NRLA. How many people are NRLA members? Oh, this is like a home game. Excellent stuff. So yeah, well, thank you for your continued support. And you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not exactly from exactly around this area. I actually hail from sunny Essex. Exactly home games, isn't it? Thanks for telling me West Ham fans. Bring the mood down early. Fundamentally, I understand if you are LA members, talking to a member earlier, this gentleman in front of me, I understand there was a rejig around regional reps maybe being a bit more visual, more boots on the ground, shall we say. We are looking to address that. We know it's a concern of members, but it will be myself, I suppose, who will be your regional rep for the foreseeable. So I'm always happy to share my details. If you need me, I'm your eyes and ears into the NRLA, and I'm happy to feedback. Like this gentleman kindly mentioned earlier, any concerns you have, I can be your voice back into the NRLA. But yeah, for the purpose of today, this is a brand new presentation. So, did anyone come on our webinar earlier? Oh, you're going to be very disappointed because you're going to get into a worse version of that. So I'm glad you went on it. That was very good. I was on it. What's that?
You might get challenged with better questions.
Well, no difficult questions. always play the landlord support line if it gets too forensic. But yeah, fundamentally, thank you for attending that earlier. That was a fantastic performance by a policy. The slides I got are not as detailed as the ones that they've appeared. So again, apologies on what you're going to get now. But fundamentally, yeah, the purpose of these talks, I've been doing these talks for about 8 months now, probably on and off. And the key piece has been explaining the Renters' Rights Bill, the potential changes. And I felt like, at the beginning I was saying it was over the hill and about a mile away, then it was at the hill, then it was across the road. Well, we know now from Monday it's done, it's been confirmed, and I suppose it's now how we sort of deal with the transition period and we get ready for what is going to be the new world, hopefully in 6 months or so, but we're still yet to confirm exactly when that will be. So for the purpose today, hopefully it won't be too much of a repeat from earlier, but again, I'm still going to events and some people don't know some of the key headline pieces, so even if 1-2 people learn something tonight, I feel that's a success. And then the second part I just want to touch on is the minimum energy efficiency standards and the potential changes to EPCs. That is at consultation stage at the moment, but again, from a landlord's perspective and from a business perspective, it's good to understand that that could shortly be following shortly after the Renters' Rights Bill is live and ready to go.
Oops.
I'm pressing the wrong one.
Other way.
Hang on.
Other way. That's it. Well done.
Very good. I'll cover this bit. But yeah, we're the largest landlord association within the UK. If anyone is interested in learning more about our services, I'm here to the end. Come grab me afterwards. But I'm not too bothered about doing the sales pitch routine and more sort of get on to the interesting piece, which is the Renters' Rights Act, or practice saying Act rather than Bill. But as we do know, I'm sure we all do know, we've got Royal Assent on Monday, so now we move into the potential transition period. There is the word implementation, but I can't say it if I'm honest. I'm from Essex, so I'll attempt to say transition instead. But for the first part of it, again, as we showed you earlier, we just want to highlight that you guys are aware of some of the key changes that are coming. And then give you some sort of tips and tricks on how you can sort of navigate short-term, medium-term and long-term going forwards. So, I suppose the key pieces is it will be the end of the AST, all fixed terms will be null and void once we move into the new world. Anyone who's seen to be issuing a fixed term, and one key theme I would say through the bill is you're going to have to be tight in compliance, you're going to be quite tight on knowing the legislation, and there's a risk of financial penalty virtually at every corner. So again, we want to make sure you guys are prepared and ready and know what's coming, but fundamentally it will all be periodic tenancies, fundamentally a rolling 1-month contract. You will not be able to take rent until that tenancy agreement has been agreed, and you cannot take rent more than 1 month in advance. Existing rent advance arrangements would still be valid in the new world. So to give an example, my father rents a property in Billericay, he pays annually. Under the new legislation, he will still be able to keep to that agreement. If he was to move though, then in theory he would have to move under the new ruling. I think the big key piece to say is though that tenants will have greater power to leave the property at any point. So at any point they can simply give you 2 months written notice. So in theory they could move in tomorrow and on Friday say I'm moving out in 2 months' time. So there is a risk of churn. I mean, it's unlikely, I think, if it's unfurnished and they've used the cost and spent the time, they've got kids, and they'll probably be looking for a long-term home. But again, part of your application process, it could be key really to understand maybe the aspirations of the applicants, so you can probably find someone that is likely to be a long-term tenant. You will have to issue written statements in the new world. It will be outlawed that you can't just have like a verbal or oral agreement with anyone. It will have to be all documented. So a written statement, again, we are waiting for clear eyes and ears of what that will look like. As soon as we get that, as NRLA members, we will update it on our library of documents. You can simply download and utilise in your own business model. There's restrictions around rent increases as well. I was talking to a couple of landlords there, so this might be a time to review your portfolios and see if there's a potential to raise some of the potential rents in the short term, because once the new Act is live, it will be restricted to once a year. You must increase it you must do it via a Section 13 Form 4A. Having a rent increase clause in your agreement fundamentally will be null and void, so you'll have to go through that process. The key piece to understand as well is though that the tenant will have 2 months to dispute any rent increases. They can take it to the first tier tribunal. That is obviously a practice which is live now, but the big change is really that no rent increase will actually start until the tribunal has made a decision if that is a fair rent. So our worry was there from a logistics perspective, will there be an uptick in tenants going to the first year to the tribunal, if nothing else to kick the can down the road knowing the rent increase will not kick in until that decision has been made. One thing to say as well, the tribunal will have the ability as well, if they believe that rent increase could cause financial hardship, they could actually extend when that new rent increase starts by a further 2 months as well. So this is something we've campaigned on quite heavily. Again, if you was on the webinar already, you would have learnt this, but again, there has been a bit of softening from the government around this, and there is talk of maybe a third party sort of managing this process and looking to provide market research information to hopefully sort of reduce the amount of people that take it to the tribunal. From your own business model though, if you're an agent or you're a landlord, if you can provide, I suppose, some market data from like-for-like properties when you put that rent increase in, it's not a guarantee it will work, but it may stop your tenant obviously going through to the tribunal stage. From day one as well, and all this stuff I'm saying now will come from day one. So once the law is in place, from day one, this is what you'll have to move over to. Again, when it comes to advertising and discrimination, you must clearly advertise what the rent will be, whether it's weekly or monthly, and it must be clearly listed. If you are seen to be accepting an offer above that figure, again, you will be in breach of the Renters' Rights Act and potentially risk of getting a financial penalty. You can, of course, obviously put the advertising rate up and you can accept an offer lower, but please do not accept an offer above the figure that you've advertised. Again, with discrimination, you can't be seen to actively discriminating against certain sectors of society. This could be with people with children and or in receipt of benefits. So again, you must allow them to go through the full application process. So they should be allowed to view the property and apply like any other applicant would be. Again, though, from your guys' perspective, the way the supply demand imbalance is there, it varies from region to region. It can be sort of 12 to sort of 17 on average applicants per property. It's still in your power to pick who you think is the strongest candidate. So again, it will be your final decision. You won't be affected who you choose, but just make sure you don't stop someone going through the process maybe and that vetting stage. Pets as well. I think I talked about some of this in the break with someone as well. But fundamentally, yes. So pets now, you can't have a blanket ban, not allowing allowing tenants to have pets in the property. You'll have to give a valid reason. You'll have to respond within 28 days. The government has promised to provide what a legitimate reason will look like. As soon as we get clear ideas of what that will be, we'll let you know. But the key piece and the change was originally it was designed that you would be able to request pet insurance from the tenant if they did want a pet. That has now been outlawed and you cannot request pet insurance even if you allow them to have pets or not. Again, a potential wraparound, and none of these solutions, I suppose, are 100% perfect. But if you do have a good relationship with the tenant, maybe you can suggest that you get the pet insurance policy and they make some kind of contribution towards it, so at least you know you've got a policy in place. Then when it comes, obviously, to trying to get the property back, obviously the big headline, I suppose, is the end of Section 21. So once that is, once we're in the new world, you'll no longer be able to use that as a route to get your property back. You must follow everything through a Section 8, whether it's a mandatory or discretionary grounds. A couple of the grounds have been amended and added, I suppose, to the softening of the Section 21 going. One of them is the grounds for getting the property back, to sell the property and or to move a family member in. Again, though, it does come with some restrictions, and I think it's key to understand that you can't use this ground within the first 12 months of the tenancy, and you must give at least 4 months' notice. So in theory, at month 8, you could let the tenant know that you plan to use this ground to get the property back. I think the key piece, though, to explain on this, though, as well, is, though, for any reason circumstances change and you're not going to sell that property, or a family member doesn't move in, then you're unable to re-let that property for 12 months after. So, again, and if you are seen to have used this ground and it is on the database and you are advertising this property, you will be in breach and at potential of a financial penalty. So, again, I know circumstances change, but just be wary that you might end up with a void period if you decide not to sell or move a family member in. Mandatory rent arrears grounds, this is one we campaigned on quite heavily. We didn't think it struck the right balance between sort of financial hardship of the tenant and the financial hardship of a landlord, but unfortunately the government has got its way on what they wanted. It will be extended to 3 months rent arrears, and you'll have to give 4 weeks notice. Again, the key piece to understand with this is that if the rent arrears is due to a delay in universal credit payments, that would not go towards the rent arrears. So again, it's always easy to understand your tenant's circumstances, but if you can, it will save you obviously going through the process using that particular grounds and it being null and void at the end. There's a university here. Is there student landlords here? How many people are student landlords? Actually. Well, fundamentally, this one's going to be tough on you guys, if I'm honest. There is a new student grant that's been launched. It's only applicable, though, if your properties of HMO. So if you've got self-contained homes or flats, 1, 2 beds, doesn't matter if you sort of rent out to students or not, you will struggle to get the properties back to line up with the new academic year. But Grant 4A is a mechanism for you to get your properties back through the window of June and September. I think the key piece is when the new all tenants within the property must be full-time students. You have to give 4 months' notice that you plan to use it. But the key piece is you can't sign the tenancy agreement no more than 6 months prior to they moving in. So from a student's perspective in your business model, you'll be probably looking to agree probably sort of February time, March time for a September start, rather than the traditional what you might have done sort of October, November currently. Key piece on that as well is to understand is that the purpose-built student accommodation and the university's own stock will probably be exempt from the Renters' Rights Bill if they're under the Annex Code. So that's something to consider as well, that you will probably be paying catch-up to them guys who will still be able to advertise much sooner and obviously book them in on sort of 44 to 51-week tenancies. That one's very confusing. It's hard to explain, if I'm honest. If anyone wants to talk to me afterwards, I can give you a bit more detail. But that one, yeah, it's got quite a few restrictions around it. I think the key piece to say, though, with all of this, though, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, make sure you're doing your compliance, make sure you know the rules. Otherwise, you are then potentially getting a severe fine of up to £7,000, and these can increase to £40,000 for persistent offenders. So that's I'd say phase one. You can expect a lot of that will come from day one. As soon as the Act is live, you're going to have to move over to do that new world. So I can't talk tonight, it's horrific, apologies. So then we move on to the standard slide. Some of this, as we know, will be more secondary. So there has been a consultation around the Decent Home Standard. That closed recently. The NRLA has given its feedback to that particular consultation. In the consultation, it does indicate, though, the Decent Home Standard would not be live to 2035. The only caveat to that, which was mentioned by a head of policy today, there might be something around serious hazards, which may come sooner. So again, we're looking for clarity on that, what that will be and when that will be. But fundamentally, the Decent Home Standard, generally, you're looking at about 2035. We also know that AWAB's law will come across at some point. I believe it went live for social housing this week on Monday. So again, they'll have particular timelines on how speedy they respond to emergency requests from tenants. This will be brought into the PRS. Again, there will be a consultation. We will be giving feedback on that to make sure, obviously, a big social housing provider has sort of more staff to respond quickly. So what the timelines will look like for a private landlord. But fundamentally, it's aimed around sort of damp and mould, unfortunately for the poor lad who lost his life up in Rochdale in a social housing home. So from a damp and mould perspective, I know it's not always easy. I have my esteemed colleague here who's going to give a fantastic presentation on damp and mould solutions later. But I think from your guys' perspective, you're doing everything you can around the structure of the property, I suppose doing everything you can. Other big tips and tricks we advise is really if you can provide maybe the tenants with some how-to guides. I know it sounds quite simple, but it just shows that you guys are being proactive. And I think any interactions, and again, this is a theme with all of this actually, I should have said, make sure you're tracking all your interactions, you're storing it somewhere and it's to hand. So if there are any disputes on any of this, you've got it to hand that you have done your bit. Then comes the PRS database and ombudsman service. So again, we're still awaiting exactly when this two will come along. For the PRS database, I do know a few of our members are testing it, a soft launch test of what it will look like. I've not seen it myself, so I can't tell you exactly what it will be like, but it will be information about you guys as landlords and primarily information about your properties. You must be registered to the database as a landlord. You must have all your properties listed on the database. If you're not, again, you guessed it, you're in breach and could get a financial penalty. There will be a fee attached to that as well, so there's going to be a cost to be a member of the database as well. Same with the ombudsman service. This will be a mechanism for landlords to raise, tenants to raise tenants to raise concerns around landlords. Again, as a landlord, it will be mandatory to be signed up to this. There will be a fee to be part of this as well. We don't know what that cost will be at the moment, but again, you will have to adhere to exactly what the decision is made by the ombudsman service going forwards. And regarding both these points, it doesn't matter if you self-manage or you use an agency, you will still have to be registered to the database and the ombudsman service as a private landlord.
Not entirely sure. Might need to click. Share again. It's all right. Where did we get to? There? Sorry, bear with me a second. There we go.
Perfect.
We think.
Right. So I believe that's all the slides around the renters' rights bill. I think I've covered everything. Oh, hang on, did we do this one? We didn't do this one, did we? Is it afterwards? Yeah. Again, for you guys. Bear with me. I'm testing myself. As you can tell, I'm a pro. That's that one I didn't do, yeah. I thought
Yeah, that's there. There was one.
Yeah, so then this leads us on to enforcement. As I've mentioned a couple of times, you guys, please make sure you're compliant, make sure you know all the rules and you're sticking to the rules. As I've mentioned a couple of times, the risk of financial penalty is sort of littered all the way through the Renters' Rights Act. Local authorities, and obviously I don't like to do this because obviously they can't allow me to speak, and the local authorities I work with generally have very good relationships with their local landlords. They very much work off the ethos of carrot rather than stick, but just to make you guys aware, they will have greater powers to investigate. So they will have the ability to enter business properties or rented properties if they believe you're not sticking to the rules. And as you can see by some of the things there, that you can potentially get a fine for, it is admin stuff. So not being registered to the database, offering fixed terms, misusing the possession grounds. I think that, just sort of saying I didn't know the rules is not going to wash, unfortunately, in the new world. So make sure that you do know the rules and you are sticking to the rules. and that sort of leads into rent repayment orders as well. There's a greater risk of these. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago and they said there's been a spike in rent repayment orders they're seeing at the moment. So be prepared, there could be sort of businesses out there looking to take advantage. For your guys' perspective, you know, the risk is doubled basically. So currently designed, a tenant would have sort of 1 year to make a claim, and it's a claim up to 1 year's rent. It's going to be doubled on both. So they've got 2 years to make a claim up to 2 years rent. So again, as I said, please stick to the rules, understand the rules, and make sure that you're on the right side of the tracks as best you can. As we mentioned then, so the next stage, we went through Royal Assent, we're waiting for the secondary legislation, a bit more colour on some of the points we've made. There's still a few gaps that need to be filled. And obviously we're looking for an all-important transition period, what that's going to be. We have campaigned very heavily for at least 6 months from the point of secondary legislation, but we wait to see if that will be successful. And as I mentioned, the consultation around decent homes has just closed, and AWAB's law will be later this year. So some practical steps, I suppose. Again, this comes directly from the policy team. Again, and this might fit in as well when I come on to talking about minimum energy standards and EPCs after this. But I suppose it's a time to just review your portfolio, really, sort of see what properties are working, what's not working, making sure it's obviously clear of any sort of potential hazards. And I suppose start to prepare your processes. You know, have you got everything in the right place now? I would say if you are using a third party as well, just make sure that they know about the change. I'm sure they do, but it's always good from your perspective to know, to understand that they know the changes that are coming. And again, I'll touch on it in a minute. We are providing some quite a cost-effective training programs, which are sort of discounted if you're a member, but you could be a non-member as well. So again, it might be an opportunity to get yourself upskilled and ready in place. Through the transition period, if you are members, we will update the documents on our platform. So as soon as we know, we'll update the website so you have the latest documents that you can download and utilise. But again, once you get eyes in the database, and we will let our members know when this is live, make sure you sign up when you're due to. And I think for the first few weeks, I think the key piece is obviously any existing tenancies. You said this earlier in the thing, I can't remember this. There's a couple of ways it can work. So if you've got a written tenancy agreement already, you'll have to give them almost just like a pamphlet, an agenda of information of the changes coming. If you have a oral tenancy, then it might be worth you doing a written tenancy now. Otherwise, you're going to have to issue a full written statement in the new world. So get yourself prepared for that. I don't think I explained it very well, but I'll come back to that. And then fundamentally, any sort of Section 21s or Section 8s, they would still be valid for 3 months after, but they've got to obviously be processed by the court, get that court number to be in the system. As you can imagine, there's been a spike in Section 21s recently, over the last few months. So again, you've got to factor in as well, really, if you haven't started it now, are you going to get it in and through the court in time? But in theory, it's open for you guys to do. One thing to point out is the Renters' Rights Bill Hub. So this is accessing information directly from our teams, our policy team. So again, if you are members, make sure you go on that, and obviously you'll get the live information. We was told to say as well, just check your preferences on your membership account. I know feedback is you guys get a lot of emails a lot of the time, but just make sure that you're getting you're pleading for the latest sort of policy information to make sure it is getting in your inbox. So just check your preferences on that. And I suppose, as my policy team discussed earlier, what can we do now, really? So we're campaigning on that, that right time, that length of transition period, campaigning on at least 6 months. We will work with the government to make sure that everything we provide document-wise and information-wise, that our landlord support team are up to date with the latest news, and so is the documents we put on our website for our members. And as my Director of Policy said earlier, I suppose the next phase now is obviously assessing the Renters' Rights Bill, as the Renters' Rights Act, and sort of, I suppose, holding to account some of the concerns we've raised through the process. It's making sure that we campaign either by ourselves or within partnership to make sure that we know some of the concerns we had can be raised and we provide it with data-backed argument. So yeah, if anyone is interested, we've got courses running. They sort of price from about £60 to £80 if you're a member. So it's about 4 hours for you to complete it. So again, it's pretty cost effective considering some of the fines that are out there. If you are interested, go onto the website. You can book and pay directly, or you can scan the QR code as well if you wish. I'll hold it there because there's one there.
On the rent increases, if you've already served notice on a rent increase and the due date for the increase passes and they haven't challenged it, are you able to enforce it still, or do you have to then send the section 13?
It's a good question. I have to check that. I've not been asked that. I'd say it would be valid, but it would be valid if you've gone through the correct process and it's been there and it's not been challenged. I would say that would be fine.
Yeah, I didn't use section 13. I just
Yeah.
yeah.
Just related to that, what about if the increases in the tenancy agreement? Will that carry on until the new amendment comes in, or is that stop?
Yeah, so current arrangements would, yeah, but in the new world, basically, a rent increase would be valid in your tenancy agreement. You're going to have to do it for a section 13, it's going to have to be processed.
But when does that start? Immediately? Or?
No, once it comes into law. So in theory, once, say from April 1st, you would say, if you pick April 1st, the example, that's the date it starts. From there, any rent increases after that, fine, you're going to have to, if you've got it in your tenancy agreement, it's not going to be, well, you can have it in there, but you're going to have to do a section 13.
James, are you happy to take questions on the renters' rights bits now, or do you want to get to the end of your presentation and then
I've got
take
about
questions?
10 minutes to go and then we can have questions. What works?
Yeah, whichever way. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it seems to be quite good. He's pressed the button. It's all right.
We had another question. Sorry.
At one stage, there was talk of 3 weeks extra deposit for pets. You've been standing on that. Has that not gone through?
What bit for the pet, sorry?
Extra 3 weeks deposit for that small.
No, as far as when the project's going to stay as it is, yeah.
Did we get anything as a
No, as I said, you can't have pet insurance either. So basically,
no, on anything. Did we get any benefits from this bill? No, I'm just asking if the landlord did the NRLA actually went lead for us.
you would argue that. No, it's a fair comment. So as I said, the argument, this comes out quite a lot actually, so it was quite a tough gig, if I'm brutally honest. I mean, I wasn't in there with them. So we was able to be at the table, and I think the policy line is it's better to be at the table talking rather than on the outside shouting in. But fundamentally, virtually everything we campaigned on, and if you look at the House of Lords, they raised about 300 amendments, and they all got rejected. So this is a flagship policy from the Labour government, quite headstrong on what they wanted. So yeah, fundamentally, like even like the rent arrears, we did think that was a strike the right balance for a landlord to be out of pocket potentially for another 2 months with the extra month and the 4 weeks notice. But unfortunately, the way it's been designed, it's designed. Tenant favour, shall we say? Not actually too political, if I want to
Thanks.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit like Tomb Raider because you're all kind of still together.
I've got a 2-year tenancy agreement, which has got an increase built in next June. Can that be effective, or will I have to go through the new process?
Yeah, once the new bill comes live, you'll have to go through the new process.
Okay, so I can't rely on the existing tenancy, even though it's
No.
agreed
So
prior to
all the existing AST will basically flip onto a pyramid tenancy.
Yeah.
So all the legislation will change. So say April 1st, from April 1st in the new world.
So the existing tenancy, the existing tenancy agreement doesn't protect the tenant either. I can just give it 4 months' notice when the new legislation comes in.
Yes. Yeah. So all you can't do is issue a section 21, but you can go to the section on the section 8, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. You said about taking rent in advance. When you start a new tenancy, obviously the tenant's got to pay the first month's rent and the deposit prior to moving in. So what is actually considered as in advance? You've got to have it for the first day of tenancy.
You're allowed to take your deposit as you were. That stays exactly the same. Regarding taking the first month's rent, you're not allowed to take it to the tenancy agreement has been signed.
So if they pay on the first day of tenancy, if they're moving on the first, they pay the money on the first.
Yeah, I mean, there is a thing that you're not allowed to take more than 1 month advance. It might be 5 weeks, so you're not really going to get told off for that. I think what it's designed is that you ask someone to pay 3 months or 6 months. That's how long it's decided. The calendar dates don't quite align, and they are allowed. One thing to say with this is, in our understanding, is if a tenant volunteers to pay rent in advance or volunteers to pay more, in theory you could accept that, but you've got to be crystal clear that you've got that documented it is that way round and it wasn't you doing it the other way round. So, but yeah, in theory, like example with my dad, he pays annually, so he will still be allowed to in the new world, still pay 12 months in advance because that's the arrangement in his agreement. But if he was to move somewhere else, in theory, then he can only pay 1 month. He could offer 12 months, but it would be his decision.
I think in the agreement it says must be paid by the first day of the tenancy. So if they pay it earlier, I guess it's down to
yeah, what you can't do is take the month's rent before they sign this. That's the key piece change, really. If you do that, you're in breach. So obviously there's a risk there, I suppose, that they don't pay. Obviously, then you're straight into rent arrears then. But you know, hopefully that won't happen too much. But yeah, they must sign, then you can take the first month. If it's for 5 weeks, what they're trying to stop is you demanding 6 months basically.
Thank you.
Question about the court process. In the last government, I think, were delaying this bill because the courts were not, well, hugely delayed. What's happening with the latest government in terms of the courts and speeding things up and so on?
Very good question. That's something we have campaigned on. But fundamentally, that's one of our worries. We did ask for a full court assessment, if I'm honest, on the impacts, because on average it takes about 8 months, I believe. In parts of London, it's taken about 15 months. So again, that is a long time for someone to be out of pocket. They have talked about speeding up the process, but I can't give any good positive news, I'm afraid. I think there was about 300 extra staff were promised, but I don't think that's going to do a lot, if I'm brutally honest, either. Our worry with the tribunal and with the courts, they're going to be overwhelmed. It's just going to push everything back and back. I think, unfortunately, with the bill, and I've said this to a couple of points, I think, unfortunately, you probably won't see the assessment, and it's not great for you guys to know this, but they probably won't understand probably the impact of some of the things they've done, unfortunately, to its life. Which is obviously not the news you want, and I'm sure you don't want that news, but unfortunately you could be into some short-term pain till they realise what this is. But that's one of our main concerns at the courts. How are they going to cope? They can't cope now.
If you issue notice to reclaim the property, to sell it, what date does and you don't sell it, what date does the 12-month...
From the date you issued the notice?
The day you issue the notice,
yes.
Not the day that you decide, I can't sell this.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing this came up before, but someone said, what happens if you do sell it? Basically, that doesn't matter. If you sell the property, it doesn't matter. But I know someone asked me that a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, if you do go ahead, get the property back and then sell it, but obviously we're not in the private rented sector, so you don't have to worry about that property.
Where am I going next? That way? Got too many. I'll come back.
So if you need to start new, as you said, there would be a short hold tenancy that go back to 1 month. Do you have to change the tenancy agreement, and does that count to start the new agreement? So then that's 12 months.
So basically, existing tenant, if you've got a tenancy already in place, you'll just have to issue what's like a small information to the tenant that the new world under the new changes. We're not crystal clear on exactly what that would be, but if you are an NRLA member, we will have a version you can use. It's going to come directly from the government, that, so we'll basically, or we'll prompt you to that. That's going to be issued by the government, what you need to share with your tenant. So you don't have to issue a fresh new tenancy, but the key piece is, in theory, it's not a fixed term anymore. So that will be gone, and it will basically be a 1 month rolling contract, whether it's existing or new.
And then the 12, it wouldn't start the new tenancy in the 12.
No, that tenancy would carry on, but it's just a 1 month thing, and the tenant can leave at any point, give you 2 months' notice.
Another quick question about courts. If you've already issued a section 21 and then it takes a long time to go to courts, could it expire? And then
it could expire, yeah.
And then you can't.
Yeah. So that's the worry, is that obviously there's been a spike in people looking to get their properties back. If it could be an issue with a court number, then it should go through to the conclusion, but that may be challenging in certain areas. It varies from court to court, unfortunately. So I can give you
How
a
long does it take to get a court number?
That number I don't know. That's statistic I know it's the whole process takes about 8 months on average nationally, from start to finish.
You talked about rent exempted payment order extending from 1 year to 2 years. Just that, please.
So that's fundamentally when you generally it's if you fall foul of a particular offence really. So generally it's more about big offences, obviously not licensing issues, hazardous issues. But what it's changed to now is more admin issues as well. So again, if you are breach of the database, if you haven't issued the correct information, you could be in breach. So there's a variety. I think it was about 8 overall originally. There's about 15 now. But a lot of the additions are very much admin stuff. So the bits I talked about, you could be enforcement now, that will all technically come under rent repayment order offences now. So I think the key is for you guys, as I said, compliance, compliance, compliance. And that's a bit boring, but fundamentally make sure you know exactly what you're doing and you've issued everything correctly and on time. Because at this event I was at, it was implied, they didn't say it directly, but they implied that there are businesses going around looking potentially at rent repayment opportunities, and they expect a spike once we go into the new world. So just make sure, it used to be for very serious hazard offences, you've done something quite major, but now it can include admin errors. So just make sure that your property is clear as hazards, you've done everything you can from the compliance perspective, and make sure, yeah, all the admin stuff is up to date.
What are the reasons we can give for...
Closer.
What are the reasons we can give for no pets?
We're waiting for that information. Yeah, so the government are allegedly going to provide some guidance on what they think is fair and reasonable. But I mean, I would guess if it's an HMO and someone's got a Rottweiler walking around, I personally wouldn't be happy with that. So that I think the key is you can't just have a blanket ban. You can't say I've got an allergy, but the property's 200 miles away. You know, you're going to have to sort of give some valid reasons. But again, the government has promised to provide guidance on what they define as reasonable.
So these regulations only apply to England, or do they apply to Scotland and Wales at all?
No, Scotland's separate, and Wales has got the Rent Smart Wales. They've already got something like this in place. So what's been quite handy for our policy team is that they've gone through this before, so they understand some of the concerns and the worries. So yeah, this is purely for England.
And my second question was, are you seeing a rise in landlords exiting the landlording business because of these pending rules?
From our own personal data, yes, we do if you are members, you can join the surveys and polls. I don't know if you guys are involved, but it's always good to hear your feedback. On our last sentiment, I think it was 35% of landlords are considering reducing their property by at least one property, whereas 7% were looking to increase. From talking to one of our partners, a landlord property exchange, they've seen a lot of landlord-to-landlord transactions on the portfolio side. But I think we released a story last week that the biggest cause of homelessness at the moment is landlords leaving the market. So yeah, we will do that. And again, the consequence of that is obviously the supply and demand imbalance will go up, and obviously the very purpose of who it was meant to support this bill, the lead poor properties that they can look at will get harder and harder.
I saw a hand go up round here somewhere. Was it you?
Hold on. Thanks. It was about the pet situation actually. So I have a flat and so I have a leasehold, and the leasehold says no pets. So would that be considered?
I suspect that would be. I would suspect that. I think you'll see common sense, hopefully. It says inverted common sense, but yeah, I believe, yeah. Probably balanced here. Told not to be too political.
Any other questions? Down there, that's right. Go here and there.
I just wondered whether the NRLA are going to be gathering statistics on the impact. How are they going to be used?
How we're going to do it, I don't know, it's a good question. But fundamentally, yeah, a big part of our next bit of a campaign is obviously we had concerns along the bill. We've raised our concerns. You know, a lot of the time we were told we were scaremongering, a lot of the time. There's some powerful lobbies on the other side, which got quite loud voices. So I think, unfortunately, it's not the ideal you want, but it's the proof will be in the pudding when, unfortunately, there are issues sort of down the line. We look to track that landlords leaving, you know, how long it's going to take the courts to process, if that number is going to extend. Is there going to be more problems with rent arrears, with landlords struggling with their business model? So we will look to track that. How we do that is a very good question. If I'm honest, I can't give you an answer on how we're going to do that. But that is our intention, to use our argument data driven, and to do it in conjunction with other. We did one a couple of weeks ago around obviously the local housing allowance being frozen. Yeah. We did that in conjunction with the CIH. We did something about enforcement recently with landlord action. So again, we're always looking to partner with like-minded bodies to make the voice louder. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a little while. We'll see the impact, and obviously then we can push back. But yeah, that's our next plan.
How do you think you're going to be able to push back? Have you got any idea of
This is where we've got to be careful. We will attempt to. How successful will be. It's like all things. I mean, I've got 7-year-old twins. You know, sometimes they don't admit they made a mistake. They dig in, they double down. Not I compare the Labour government with my 7-year-old twins before anyone tells me off for that. We will attempt to. Whether they will listen, whether they say what we're saying is correct, or they'll try and skew it, I don't know. All I can say is from what the experience we've had so far, we have been told a couple of times that we're scaremongering and we're giving worst case scenarios a lot of the time. So whether we'll get that same line in the future, we shall see. I wish I could give that a nose, but I can't.
Hi James, thank you so much for this talk. It's really interesting. Everyone in this room is probably way ahead of me because I'm looking to rent out my first property in the next couple of months. So A, is it worth it? Should I bother? Given all this and the fact that Reading's got thousands of new flats coming up, brand new flats, and mine is not a brand new flat. And secondly, if I do bother, should I wait until this comes in proper to then, so I'm not sort of doing the rigmarole of posting tenancy agreements and that kind of thing?
Well, welcome to the landlord community. Some of your fellow friends are here. I would say that from a personal business, I think obviously it sounds scary, but I think from talking, I can only go on personal experience of talking to landlord members. A lot of them have had their tenants for multiple years. Their rents are fair, they have a good relationship with their tenants. I think if you're doing everything correct, I don't think, hopefully, you'll see too many problems in the new world. I think when you get a new tenant and you pick the wrong one, it's going to be much more difficult to wind yourself back out of that. So you probably, if I was honest, I'd probably open up to the room and say, who reckons should start now as a landlord and stay in the industry? Who would? Hands up.
Yeah,
yeah, there we go.
You're going to have to choose more carefully.
I was going to say, I was spending a few more hands up than that. But fundamentally, I'd say still a business model. I think you just got to make sure, if you're new to it, that you understand all the different changes. Whether you do it now or when the new deal comes in, again, it's your discretion, really. There's no harm looking now. The one thing I would say is, the supply and demand is still in your favour. There are lots of customers looking for properties who need rented property. So if your property is of a good standard, you get a good tenant. As someone said earlier, I believe yourself, 9, 10 years they can be in the property. So if you pick the right person, it could be a very good business model for you.
And there's no idea yet when the bills are coming into effect?
Not in theory. We would get, if I'm guessing, well, I say my policy team, we'd expect some point in Q2 next year, if all goes well. April to May to June, possibly. But all the governments at this stage is that they will give a fair time for the transition period. But it's not just, it's landlords, it's agents, local authorities as well. There's so many people who've got to shift their ways of working that we hope that they're not going to rush it. Like all things, if you rush it, it doesn't come to fruition very well. But yeah, give it a go. If it goes wrong, don't quote me on that.
Is there a schedule for the secondary legislation?
We're waiting for it. So again, it should come in the next couple of weeks. Traditionally, it's normally sort of 1 week to 2 weeks after Royal Assent. So once that is there, obviously, we will share that. One thing I would say for you NRLA members, thanks for joining the webinar. They said it today. There's going to be a series of webinars, really. And I'd say they're really useful. You just sign up to it. You don't have to watch them live. You can watch it back later. It's an hour. And if I'm honest, you've got me today. You'll get the head of policy. You'll get my director of policy. You'll get the brains of the operation on those particular webinars, and I think they're invaluable. For an hour of your time, you can watch it back in the evening, just register to them, and we're going to do a full series as we go through the different stages.
Is there any truth in the rumour that there's a clause which says if you're a Labour minister, it doesn't apply?
No, gosh.
My question is the reverse of the last one, really. How many people are thinking of getting out of the rental market in this room?
Yeah, well, that's what it's hard to room. Who's looking to get out of the market? Ooh, who's looking to reduce their portfolio? What would you say?
Yeah, probably a
Quarter.
Yeah,
So,
probably a quarter.
but for every property lost, obviously that's one less for the tenant to have. Well, there was, I'm sure it was actually released in a report last week that the biggest cause of homelessness at the moment is the landlord selling the property.
Thanks. So I've just said to the lady who's thinking of getting into it, the landlord guarantee scheme is excellent. It really supports it, really helps. I really recommend
Thank you very much.
My long-term plan was to evict, to sell my property now. Terrible timing. I've literally just served the notice to quit on Saturday. So I've given her 2 months. She won't be able to leave because she's got there's no properties. So she's going to have to, I'm going to have to do a Section 21 in January. Will I be able to? Or what?
You can.
Still can.
Whether it will go through in time is another matter though. So you've got to wait.
So then
really.
what?
You've got 3 months off. Yeah, unfortunately then you are looking at Section 8.
So I have to start again.
Theory, yeah. If he doesn't get signed off by the court, you don't get the court number. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But I mean, give it a go now though. Give it a go, start the process. You never know, it varies from court to court really. If you get your court number issued, then you should see it through to the end. But obviously, as you can imagine, as we talked about, the courts are very busy. There's no guarantee, I'm afraid.
Can you issue both? Can you issue a Section 21 and a Section 8 at the same time? Both.
Yeah. And one thing to say with it, if you do it in a Section 8 now, you can use the existing rules, whatever ground you're using. So if it was rent the reason, it could be 2 months at the moment, that would still be valid. If you went down that rule, if you've got it in time. Obviously they're valid for 12 months, Section 8, but it's about basically getting issued within 3 months of commencement by the court, is the key piece.
Sorry, I missed that. Was that yes to both of the notices?
Are you finding that councils are still saying to tenants stay put until you're evicted? I'm not a landlord around here, but in my area, the council telling them don't move.
It's not something that Reading Borough Council do. However, we are obliged to let tenants know what their legal rights are. So in some cases, when we find that tenants don't have a lot of options, as the lady was just saying, and it's very difficult to find rented property, we do find that tenants overstay on notices and it is necessary to get a possession order.
Yeah. So you're looking at probably 12 months before you get paid. Well, you lose 12 months rent.
Not on the rent guarantee scheme, absolutely, no.
Any other questions that I can use the mic so everybody can hear?
I think just this one more question and then we'll let James finish his presentation.
Switch down.
Charles. Regarding rent agreement increase the tribunal, do you know how long it will sort out by the tribunal from dispute? Because tenants even increase £5, they probably will disagree with you. So how do you sort out this?
One thing I'd say is there has been a softening on the government on this particular point. In Scotland, they use the Valuation Office to provide market research and data. So we have suggested using an agency like that, that hopefully will reduce. But unfortunately, the way it's designed, if I was a tenant, why would you not? You've got to ask yourself, why would you not appeal it? You know, you're kicking the can down the road. You know it's not going to go above the figure you suggested. So we naturally expect there to be a spike in the amount of people going through that process. And then if there's a spike, then there's a delay. So again, that's one thing that we campaigned on unsuccessfully, really. It's an assessment on how both that and the court will cope. There is talk about digitalising it and speeding up the process, but you know, the proof will be in the pudding if they actually go down that route. But that's the wraparound they're suggesting at the moment. But fundamentally, from a tenant's perspective, why would you not? I mean, it's as simple as that, really. It's a free hit.
Okay.
about admin errors and things. So a lot of the sort of private landlords, over the data protection and privacy side of our tenants, I was reading an article saying because we've got that information about our tenants, that we should actually be registering themselves with the Information Commissioner's Office.
Yes, if you're a data processor, yes.
Yeah, so I just wondered, do you have, so is that a legal requirement on our behalf?
It is a legal requirement,
Yeah,
yes.
so, and I don't think, we didn't realise that until we were looking at the information and checking that we were being compliant. So is that, if you're not registered with them, do you give any information of how you go about doing that? And is there a cost implication involved as a landlord? And could they use that in getting their rent back if you weren't?
On the rent repayment order, I suppose in theory it's not mentioned as a specific, but I suppose it could be an argument in court. Regarding being ISO registered, yeah, you do it directly by the government. We do have information on our website. Cost-wise, I don't think it's that much. I think it's about 50, 60 quid. 40, 50, 60 quid. Yeah, so yeah, if you're the data processor, then you should be really registered. If you're holding people's data and you're processing that data, you should be registered. No worries. I was going to, I think I was 15 minutes left, but we'll skip for it. But this is, to give you some more good news, there's going to be some potential change around minimum energy standards and how that's going to be scored going forwards. Now, from the landlord events I've been doing, has anyone been to one of the Connect events that we host? But the sentiment really is a lot of landlords have got used to the renters' rights bill coming, but this one is worrying them a little bit more, if I'm honest, again, on our recent survey as well, this concern. So again, I'd like to say at this stage there are only consultations, but again, it's good for you to be aware, especially when there could be a potential cost involved on all your properties. Fundamentally, there's 3 consultations that have run or are running. One was around a new EPC to replace the current rating system. One around should it be a requirement to have a certain level of minimum energy standards to be allowed to rent the property out. First written by Mr. Ed Miliband, not this Labour conference the year before, as potentially EPCC. And later this year we're expecting the home energy model, and that will be something we're going to look at the actual metrics of how an EPC is scored going forwards. So to give you some timelines, as I mentioned, the first 2 have closed now, I believe. So we are expecting, we did, as the NRLA, obviously give our feedback to the consultation. We are expecting to hear from the government this year. On the new home energy model, that will begin some point this year, and we're expecting more information on the back end of that next year. And then from there, if the changes do go ahead, the new EPCs will arrive and there will be new legislation and guidance on how you respond. Are the consultations written at the moment? No. If the consultation, the homes energy does go live from the end of 26, you'll have to be adhering it by all new tenancies by 2028 and all existing by 2030. You can probably work out though that a new tenancy can now become, an existing tenancy can now become a new tenancy within a 2-month window. So again, from looking at your portfolio, it's probably prudent to look at 2028. Why are they changing the EPCs? 2 reasons really. One is there's an inconsistency on how they're scored. We get this quite a lot from our members from region to region. But the other one is, I believe, it's to imbalance on energy cost and not on energy efficiency as we move towards net zero. So fundamentally, they've got these sort of 4 key metrics. The fundamental one will be the fabric efficiency, how well the property retains heat. And then from there, you'll have to look at 2 secondary metrics, either the heating system, higher points for low carbon, and also higher points for smart readiness, solar panels and smart thermostats. It will also include the energy costs as well within the new calculation. So again, the consultation addresses, obviously EPCs are valid for 10 years, they're not required across all the PRS, and they are only valid at the point of marketing. Again, the consultation looks to address these as well, so it could be mandatory to have an EPC at all times like a gas cert. It could be extended like room-only HMOs, and they are looking at how long a duration of an EPC would last going forwards. My policy team have looked at the 2 existing consultations, and they've come up to the conclusion really that we understand once that the new legislation is in place at 26, if successful, then at that point the landlord will be expected to spend up to £15,000 per property. Firstly, focusing on the fabric performance, whatever that guidance will be, you'll have to sort of adhere to that fabric performance first of all within your cost allowance, and then from there you can look at one of the two secondary metrics, where it's the heating system and or the smart readings. Once you've spent your £15,000, I'll remember to share these if you want one of my business as well. Once you've spent your £15,000, then you can look to register for a cost cap exemption. As you can probably note there, obviously that's a big jump up from where the cost cap currently sits at £3,500 at the moment, going all the way up to £15,000. To compensate this, there has been some changes around the exemptions. They'll be extended from 5 to 10 years. But fundamentally, you will be expected to spend up to £15,000 per property before you can apply for the exemption. The key pieces, though, from these pieces, the way it's written at the moment is that any money you spend now on your property will not go towards that £15,000 until we have the new laws in place. So any money you spend now, think about it now, because it won't go towards that cost cap in 2026. And the key piece as well is a bit like the Renters' Rights Bill. Really, there's a really increased fine if you're not adhering to the new legislation. And obviously, that's a massive jump up from £5,000 to £30,000 for having an incorrect EPC. Bit of advice from us. Our understanding at the moment, I said to someone earlier, that EPCs will be valid when we move over to the new legislation. So in theory, if you had 5 years left, it's A to C, you had 5 years left, it would still be valid for those 5 years before you have to adhere to the new changes. So from a portfolio perspective, it might be wise for you to review your portfolio. If you are A to C, and say you've only got a year, 18 months left in it, it could be prudent to get that reassessed, lock in that A to C now, you've got the 10 years, and it gives you more time to get the property update to the new terms. If you're close to a C, again, potentially go out there and see the cost of work and understand what it could do. If you are close, again, it could be worth spending the money in the short term, getting your EPC, locking in the 10 years, and obviously then you can deal with it nearer the time. If you're well off C, you've tried things and you're not quite getting there, you've tried, done the underfloor heating, or you've put in a low carbon and it's not going to get to a C, then it might be prudent to take a step back, wait to see what the new rules and what the new metrics are, and then obviously then make a business decision from there. The only thing I would say with that is obviously, if it's anything to do with health and safety, make sure you do that in the immediate. This is only for, obviously, to get in line with the new energy efficiency scores. There is a lot of funding out there as well. So again, Eco4 has been extended and get the Warm Homes grant. So again, please do look out for what sort of potential support you could get. I think like Warm Homes, is that managed by you guys, isn't it? Warm Homes is directly from your council. So speak to your council about potentially what you can get. I believe you can get support of 100% on the first property and 50% thereafter. But it's means tested and it's based on the value of the annual income of the tenants. I think it's 36,000 or below again. So not all areas are covered by that. I don't know if you guys are covered by that area or not.
We do have some staff here that you might be able to speak to in the break if you're interested in that.
But please,
we do have staff here who you'll be able to speak to in the break if you're interested in that in particular.
Yeah, so always worth talking to the council to see, if you're in an area you could potentially get support. What are we doing? So again, we're campaigners. One thing I would say with this, and this has come from our policy team, we feel that we're getting a bit more traction with this particular part of the government compared to the Renters' Rights Bill. So hopefully, can't guarantee anything, but it feels like the conversations are going a lot smoother than possibly around the Renters' Rights Act. So hopefully there might be some softening around this. The big thing we're campaigning is on the timelines. Kingfisher, who I believe is the parent company of B&Q, has simply stated if we've got to build 1.5 million homes and get all this done by 2028, there simply isn't enough work people in the country to get the work done. So again, we are campaigning on realistic timelines of maybe having the fabric performance by 2030 and secondary by 2036. As mentioned earlier, we are asking for more financial support. So again, the landlords can get the support it needs and pushed onto the tenant. And also that affordability cap. The government's own statistics are up there on the screen, around £7,000 to £9,000. So we are campaigning for the cap to be more in line with their own estimates rather than the £15,000 which they've suggested. We will let you know if we are successful. As again, it's always good to meet the members in the room. As I said, it's always good to hear your voices. It's great to hear you talk to me directly. But again, you can go directly through to us on the website. There's multiple ways. The hub gives you the support around the Renters' Rights Bill. Surveys and polls, if you want to get your feedback on the NRLA and what we should be doing, the direction it goes in, please do get involved and join our campaigns as well. We're always willing to support the members. Just a little bit on your membership. I always quite like this one because there is quite a lot to your membership. I want to make sure you guys are utilising it to its full capacity. So you do get the advice line. It's open 6 days a week. There's about 30 staff on there, all highly trained and highly skilled. You can also email them. We've also got a WhatsApp communication service now as well, if that's an easier method of communication. As I said, there's the library of docs. Please utilise them. Use them in your own business model. Download, white label, use them. They are there to support. We've got a couple of softwares as well we've launched, again, to make sure you stay compliant. So again, you can sign up to those, give them a trial, and to make sure you keep ahead of your deadlines. Webinars, look on the website, sign up to them. They're free and included. We do have multiple partners that offer discounts and memberships. Again, we've got Suppliers Hub on the website. There's about 40, 50, I can't remember them all if I'm brutally honest. But again, it might be one in there that might support you in your business model to look at the deals they offer. And again, we will continue to campaign and lobby on your behalf. These are some of the discounts that we currently have through some of our supplier members. So again, check out the website and see if any of them can support you. Training support is available. As I said, we've got the Renters' Rights Bill, but whether you're an agent, you're a local authority, or you're a landlord, we do have about 50 courses which are available. Go onto the website, check them out, they're there, and you get a discount as a member. These are the 2 softwares I mentioned. So Portfolio is a property management system which is exclusive only to NRLA members. It allows you to track, keep all tenant information on there, and make sure you stay compliant with all your gas certs. It's a central place of storing certificates around one property. Also has a diary management functionality so you can stay ahead of the curve and don't miss any deadlines. We've just launched a pay version as well at £5 a month. This allows you to connect open banking as well. And it's got some more detailed reporting suites on there as well. So again, if you are interested, come grab me. I can explain more after. They are integrated together, so you can use both systems in conjunction. But if you want to use Save 2 separately, that's a way to order your certificates as well. So again, if you ever need a certificate ordered, you can jump on there and get a certificate ordered by a Save 2 member. We'll then take care of the process. We'll contact the tenant, we'll get an engineer to complete work, and we'll send you your updated certificate once the inspection has been completed. And that's it. And if you're not a member, new to the industry, feel free to join us. The more the merrier. The more members we have, this is the sales pitch, the more members they have, the bigger our voice is, the more we campaign on your behalf. If anyone is interested, come and grab me afterwards. And that is the end. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, James. That's such a lot of information for us all to take in. In just a minute, we're going to have a quick break for some refreshments, and there's tea and coffee and water available in the room where you were in earlier. And as Councillor Yeo said earlier this evening, this event is organised by the Rent Guarantee Scheme. If you're not already familiar with what we do, please do stop by the stall and have a chat. And also speak to a staff member. We're all wearing badges, you can't miss us. If you've got any questions or comments or suggestions about how we might work better with you as landlords here at the council. One couple of things I want to talk to you about quickly. Some of you may be aware of our Click Before You Evict website. This is really a place where landlords who might be struggling with tenants or might be aware that their tenants are struggling can get help and advice. It's designed as a kind of a one-stop shop. You can go on there, you can find information, you can contact us, and also you can find information you might want to pass on to your tenants. Our message to you really this evening is there's such a lot we can do to support in private sector tenancies, and the earlier you tell us there's a problem, generally the more that we can do to help. We've got Click Before You Evict up on a screen on the RGS stand, so please do stop by and have a quick look at it. You never know when it might just come in useful. Lastly from me, it's so helpful if you can complete our feedback questionnaire. And this year you've got 2 ways of doing it. You can, if you've got a smartphone, you can use the QR code, which is available here. It's available on the agendas that are all around and on the RGS stand. If you prefer a more traditional approach, we do have paper copies as well. We'll even give you a free pen. But it's so helpful to us if you could fill that in. At 8:15, we have our second presentation, which is going to be Michael Pry. He's going to talk to us about damp and mould in rented property. So please do get yourself some refreshments, and I will see you back here then. Thanks very much.
sort of you're the right person to speak.
Welcome back, everybody. How loud I need to be. Welcome back. We are going to have our second presentation this evening, which is from Michael Pryor, who works for Safeguard Europe. He's going to be speaking to us about damp and mould, causes and remedies in private sector property, and of course give us an outline of what AWAB's law, when it comes in, might look like for us. Thanks very much.
Okay, hi everyone, so my name is Michael, so I'll be presenting about some damp and mould. So I work in the laboratory at Safeguard, so we are a damp proofing sort of chemical company based down in Horsham. So just who we are, so like I say, we're a family owned business, so we're around about 40 years, based in Horsham, so it's actually started as a family owned company, so this guy David started about 40 years ago, now his two sons have taken over. So we're a market leader in comprehensive sort of damp proofing problems. So if you've got any sort of damp issues, we've sort of got the solutions. And we do actually sort of export globally. But as a company, you can go onto our company website and buy any of our products with next day delivery. We also sell on Amazon, Wix, Toolstation, Screwfix, B&Q. I think we're in Tesco as well now. So we're available everywhere. So if you need any sort of damp proofing products, you can get them straight away. So this is just very quickly what we are as a company. So it's about 70 of us as a staff team. So we have an extensive sort of support team of people in the warehouse. We've got our main directors there, and we've got a large sales team and also a technical support team as well. And just as part of what why we are quite a market leader in terms of damp proofing, we have a team of dedicated research chemists. So I've got a degree in chemistry, and we do develop our own products. We do proper product development into damp proofing products that stop mould and condensation and other types of damp. So we do collaborations with different universities to sort of corroborate our products really. Okay, so what I'll be going through today, so I'll be looking at what is dampness and look at AWAB's law, and then I'll be going to the main type of dampness, looking at condensation, penetrating damp, rising damp, and then a quick conclusion. So basically, what is dampness? So dampness is where virtually all building materials will contain some level of moisture within their structure, even when we think of them as dry. So you can see there that plaster can have anywhere between 0.2 to 1% moisture within its structure. Concrete can have 5%, and then timber can be anywhere between 10 to 20% moisture within its natural structure. And that's normal amounts, and that's what we think of as dry. When we start to get above these levels, is then we start to think there actually is dampness really. So, for instance, if you've got, you take a plaster sample out of your house and it's above, say, about 5%, then you start to think, okay, I've got a bit of a damp problem. So when you talk about dampness, it's all about when you get above these levels and they start to cause harm. So dampness occurs when moisture becomes visible or causes damage to the structure. So the classic, signs to look out for will be drips and puddles, discoloration, deterioration of the finishes, so you can sort of see to your skirting boards. Mould growth, so this is the house that we went into that had a big leak and sort of mould developed everywhere really. Salt attack, so where you get frost damage, so this is from efflorescence. And also sort of rot as well, so anywhere where you've got timber suspended floors, if you start to put insulation underneath that, great, you've started to reduce your heat loss, but then you've also blocked up the any sort of ventilation, so you could then develop dry rot. So there are three main types of damp that we're going to go into. So we've got condensation, penetrating damp, and rising damp. So condensation is where it's sort of internal moisture. We've got rising damp, which is moisture that comes up through the capillaries, and also penetrating damp, which is moisture coming basically through wind-driven rain. Okay, so now let's have a look at AWAB's law. So AWAB's law came into effect on Monday, and basically it came into effect for social landlords. So for you guys, you don't have to worry at the moment, it doesn't affect you at the moment. For private landlords, currently unknown when it's going to come into effect, but possibly 2026, 2027. It's a little bit, right now social landlords are seen as a bit of a test case now to see how it goes. And I think the government are going to suddenly discover that social landlords don't have as much money as they really can to fix all these problems. So what it does, it compels landlords to fix serious hazards in their properties, such as damp and mould, within a set time frame. Otherwise, penalties will apply. So again, this was in memory of 2-year-old Arab Ishak, who died of respiratory issues due to prolonged exposure to mould. So it sets out this clear time frame if a hazard is found in a home. And the idea is that if you've got damp and mould in the home, the key is to deal with the mould and fungal growth and any dust mites immediately, basically. That's taken directly from the legislation, so dust mites and fungal growth must be dealt with straight away. When it comes to actual damp, you can sort of leave that for a little bit, but it's always about the mould, because the mould is the thing that causes respiratory issues for the homeowner. Oh, sorry, for the tenants as well. So what does the Arabs law take into account? It also takes into account the tenant's circumstances now. So if you've got any vulnerabilities, such as, how old is the tenant, if they've got any health issues, if they're disability, or where the actual mould is located. So if it's located in the bedroom, clearly that's the only place the tenant can live, can actually sleep. So that means that it becomes sort of an emergency hazard, so it needs to be dealt with straight away. Whereas if it's located in the bathroom, it becomes what's called a significant hazard, in which case you get a bit longer to deal with it. So this is basically what the timeline is when it comes to Arab's law. And essentially, if a tenant comes to you and says, I've got mould in my home, that counts basically at day 0. So let's, hope this will work. So notification of hazard. So you've just been told by your landlord, so this is for social landlords, so you don't have to worry at the moment, it could come in effect in the next sort of year or so. Basically, you've been made aware of a potential emergency hazard such as mould in someone's bedroom. That could be done via email or call, or even by a GP of the tenant. The GP could just contact you saying, oh, be aware that there's a lot of mould, and that can count as you're being made aware of the hazard. You must then do an investigation within 24 hours of the notification, so that's sort of day 1. So you need to go into the property and look at what the issue is and determine if it is an emergency hazard. And then you need to do what's called the make safe work. So if you've identified an emergency hazard, you know there's mould in the bedroom, that needs to be dealt with immediately. That needs to be made safe within 24 hours. So essentially you're going in there and you are spraying, you're cleaning off the mould straight away and getting it back to a clean state. That's what you have to do within 24 hours. It takes into account as working days. So, but bank holidays are included. So if you get told on Christmas Day there is mould, then you should be in there on Boxing Day, basically, as a landlord. That is, as it goes. If it's an emergency hazard, if it's a significant hazard, then I think you get it's like 5 days, not working days. So you get a bit longer, basically.
You wouldn't know until you visited, right?
Yes, I know. Unfortunately, it's extremely strict and it's been put in. But basically, the idea is to make sure that any mould issue, it's mainly about mould. That's the key thing. And any mould that has been discovered needs to be dealt with immediately, because obviously, if it's left in place and essentially the tenant becomes sick, then you are liable for any any issues that come from that. So it really is important to get your head around this, I'm afraid. I mean, like I say, this is only for social landlords, so you get a bit of time to worry about this, but this could be coming into effect in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. Okay, so where was I?
So quickly, so when it says you do an investigation,
yeah.
Is that the landlord's responsibility, or does it mean get someone like you to come in and?
Well, yeah, the landlord has got someone to do it, basically. Yeah,
What if you're not available?
But then that's what I mean. It's tricky. That's what I mean. I'm afraid you have to then. It's on you to find someone or yourself to go in and investigate.
What if the tenant reports it and then won't let you have access to the property?
Well, then if you've done everything you can to, you've done your best to try and get in the property, then you have got, you've done your job, basically. That's essentially it. So basically, you've gone in, you've done the safe works. Basically, you have to do a summary report within 3 days. Essentially, you can actually just send a text message saying we've now done the works. That can be enough, just sending a text message. And then basically, you've now discovered that the mould has been occurring. Let's just say in this property that's got mould in the bedroom, it's because of a leak from the gutter, just a leak that's caused a cold spot and it is causing mould. You now need to basically start what's called the supplementary works within 5 working days. And that basically means just start organising quotes. That's it. Just showing initiative that you're looking to start the works. You're just trying to find quotes. That's all you're looking to do within the first 5 days after you've cleaned the walls, basically. And then basically the works must commence within 12 weeks. So you get 12 weeks to start the works. The legislation does not give any reference to when it should be finished, but it does say it must start within 12 weeks. So in theory, you could go into a property that's got mould, clean off the mould, and then basically within about 85 days, you can almost not do nothing, but you can put it off, but you still need to have started quotes for, you know, looking to start the work. So again, it's quite a long time, but it does give you some sort of leeway to schedule in any sort of damp proofing works. So where does our products come in? Well, if you are looking to do these make safe works, you can also use like mould cleaners to clean off the mould. When it comes to actually sort of bridging the gap, so you've discovered a mould and you actually know what the problem is, but you can't get the work done for, you know, 8 weeks because you can't find a contractor or you haven't got the money ready. You can use things such as dehumidifiers or anti-mould paints. They're quite good solutions, as you know, just short-term solutions that will stop the mould in those sort of, you know, medium terms. And then when it comes to the supplementary works, you know, at Safeguard we have all the products available as a one-stop shop when it comes to dealing with damp. Okay, so that's just a nice quick area about Arab's Law. Right, so now let's move on to condensation and mould. So what is condensation? So it's probably the most common form of dampness in buildings, and basically it's where warm air comes into contact with cold surfaces and the moisture within the air will start to condense. So basically you get this drop in the air temperature, and basically the air can hold less moisture vapour, so it becomes more saturated until it reaches what's known as the dew point temperature, when the moisture in the air condenses out as liquid moisture on the surface. And what you'll see when it's condensation, you'll see surface droplets on impermeable surfaces such as tiles, or you can see damp patches on wallpaper. So this is where you can get confusion between condensation and, say, rising damp, where you might have damp patches on your wallpaper and you'll start saying, oh, that must be rising damp, or is it condensation? Sometimes it depends on the time of year, but usually you want to get a surveyor in to determine if that is the issue. So where are the sources of condensation? Where does the moisture actually come from? Well, if you've got a new build property, around about 4,000 litres of moisture is used to build that property. So you're talking about the, you know, the brickwork, the plaster, the concrete, the paintwork, and over the sort of, you know, 12 months, that needs to dry out. There's about 5 litres of water vapour naturally present in the atmosphere when you go into, say, like a 2-bed semi-detached house. And then there's the moisture being generated by the people. So 2 people will generate around about 9 to 12 litres of water vapour per day. And that's from, you know, your classic activities such as, you know, all of us just breathing. So people being present generate 1.2 kilos per person per day. So just all of us in here right now, we're all generating moisture just from us, you know, breathing. Cooking, whether you use electric or gas, so gas cookers generate more moisture because of the basically the propane reaction generates moisture. Dishwashing, bathing, and obviously the big one, drying clothes indoors. So that's 1.5 kilos per person per day. So how do you identify condensation? Well, the timings usually is the condensation season, so October to April is when you get most condensation, because basically what happens is that you get this high temperature during the day and then some cool off in the evening, which means that all that moisture in the air then condenses rapidly and you get condensation. You'll see those water droplets on like tiles and windows and mirrors, and also you'll then get mould growth. Mould growth is really common with condensation because basically when you have condensation, you create really pure water. It's like distilled water, which is the perfect medium for mould to grow in. And then you'll get it where there's poor airflow as well. So where you've got sort of corners or behind furniture, inbuilt cupboards, and also UPVC windows as well. So how do you measure your condensation? Well, you can measure the humidity in the air. So even just using simple little hygrometers such as this, it's quite useful just to give to tenants. You can put them on the fridge, put them in bedrooms, and they can very simply just look at them and start to determine what their level of humidity is and see, you know, if they are getting issues. And the idea is that you want to try and keep your humidity down below, say, about 75% to stop mould, because mould loves high humidity. Other ways you can measure condensation, you can use data loggers, so you can get these little like eye buttons or these bigger ones here, which are a bit more expensive, but the idea is they take accurate readings of your temperature and humidity, and the idea is they're pretty, you know, inexpensive now, so you can get them where you can actually get readouts on your phone, and you can actually connect to them, and you can also get these remote monitoring systems as well, so you can get these installed in properties, so that off-site you can actually monitor the humidities in your properties and keep an eye on what actually is going on when you're not there. So, like I said earlier, so the formation of moisture itself is not necessarily the problem. Condensation itself isn't that bad really. It's the mould that's the problem. And like I said earlier, the water produced is very pure, which allows ideal medium for mould growth. And it's mould that is the big problem because it causes a real problem to people's health. So what actually matters to mould? What allows mould to grow? Well, this is quite, it's quite a cool table, this. Basically, what it shows are what the key factors that allow mould to grow. So temperature, mould can grow anywhere between -8 and 60 degrees centigrade, which actually means that just by increasing the temperature, you're not necessarily going to stop the mould from growing. Because as you see there, it can grow in pretty much any temperature. But what it does need is high humidity. So if you have a humidity between 70 and 100%, mould will grow. So just by getting your humidity down below 70%, you should stop the mould from growing. That's, a simple fact of, biology, really. And the other thing that it needs is quite a good pH. So it likes a nice neutral pH between 2 and 11. So if you use quite, acidic or alkali building materials, you reduce the amount of mould growth. So using things such as lime or cement is more beneficial than, say, gypsum, which is more neutral and can allow more mould growth. Okay, so now let's have a look at treatments for condensation and mould. So we like to, at Safeguard, we've developed our own sort of, mould removal kit. This is sort of a spray kit. So like I said, that day one, sort of 24 hours, you need to go in there, you need to remove the mould straight away because it's all over the walls. This is quite a good product here. So this is the dry zone mould removal kit, and it's a two-part kit, basically for keeping away mould. So you've got the dry zone mould eliminator, which is basically a similar sort of, based on sodium bicarbonate and also bleach. And the idea is that together you apply it to the mould, it will then remove the mould in about 3 minutes. So we've actually done tests where it found mould all over the wall, sprayed it, left it for a couple of minutes, and the mould basically disappears. You just have to gently wipe it away, basically. And then what do you do? How do you then keep the mould away in the short term? We have another product here called Dry Zone Mould Sanitizer, which is this sort of blue bottle. And this is basically kills the mould spores. And what that does is that it stops reoccurrence of the mould in the short term, basically. And what it does, it contains quaternary ammonium salts, which then, like I say, kill the mould spores, which is ideal. So you've done the first step, which is use the mould eliminator to remove the worst of the stains. And then you've used the mould sanitizer to keep the mould spores at bay. So like I say, you can buy this kit, which costs, I think it's about £25 per kit, and it comes with 3 bottles of spray, and you can also get a microfiber cloth and also gloves as well. So it's quite a useful thing to give to tenants, basically.
Do you do it straight after, or do you have to wait for the first one to dry before you put the second
one? No, you can do the other one basically, 20 minutes after you've done the first one. Yes?
What's the actual name of the...
So it's called Dry Zone Mould Removal Kit.
Dry Zone?
Yes. So like I say, if you go after presentation, I've got these brochures just by the table. I've got plenty of them, and it's got all the information about the products I'm going to be going into about condensation and mould. So like I say, so just very quickly, step 1, apply the Dry Zone Mould Eliminator to the mouldy areas, and then leave it for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then clean the surface just with a sponge or cloth to remove the worst of the mould. So hopefully worst of the stains should be gone. And then step 3, apply the sanitizer to kill the mould spores to stop reoccurrence. So it's ideal for use in sort of kitchens, bathrooms, and sort of bedrooms. Another thing that we've just launched this year, which should be available in sort of places such as Wix, is a Dry Zone Mould Remover Gel. And this is basically a bleach-based gel for removing stubborn mould and sort of with like silicone sealants especially. But we've got loads. You can use it around sinks and grout and UPVC, and you can use it in your washing machine as well if you've got like black mould in there. And the idea is that because it's a gel, it sticks to it and you get a longer contact time. So hopefully, so this is actually what you do. So you wipe down the surface, apply it to the area, and basically leave it for 6 hours or just overnight really, and then wipe away any residue. And then basically, if you've still got a bit of mould, you can just reapply again until you're happy with the results. So you can sort of see this is one that we've done in one of my colleagues' bathrooms actually. So she had quite a bit of mould. So you literally apply it, wipe it away, and that basically was the results. That's what it was, and that's what it was after, basically. So it's really hard to remove mould from silicone sealant, actually. It's a really tricky thing. So this is why we've developed it as, like, for this year to be launched. So you've cleaned the mould away. How do you stop the mould in sort of that medium term, so you don't have to come back, within the sort of, first year or 2? Well, you can use mould-resistant paint. So we have one here, which contains a biocide to prevent further mould growth. So it should stop reappearance of black mould for up to 5 years. So it comes in white or magnolia, so a lot of properties, that's fairly common colours, and it comes in 1 litre and 5 litres, and you just simply use it as the finish. That's the idea. You don't want to overcoat it, otherwise you won't have you won't get the effect of the biocide within the paint. But if there is a particular paint that you do want to use, you can use this anti-mould additive. So this is what it looks like. It's a 100 millilitre concentrated biocide additive. So this is basically the stuff that actually kills the mould. So if you've got a particular paint that you do want to use, you just simply, if you've got a 5 litre pot, you just add it all into the pot, give it a good little mix, so you make sure it's really well mixed, and then you can apply that as your finished coat. And this will give you protection for about 3 years. So it's ideal if you've got a particular colour, or if you can use it in water-based paint, solvent-based, you can put it in your grout, and also you can put it in wallpaper paste as well. So it's effective in all those ways at preventing mould growth. We also have, there's the anti-condensation paints as well. So this is slightly different technology. What it does is you take a standard paint and you put these hollow glass spheres like bubbles in them, and basically that creates a very, very thin insulating layer. And basically what it does, it creates a very small surface temperature increase, which can prevent condensation. Quite popular and fairly inexpensive. Just be aware though, because it's got these glass bubbles in them, the finish can be a bit low quality, because basically it becomes a little bit stippled. But you can sand it down to then remove the stipples, but just be aware of that. I normally recommend using the mould resistant paint, but you can use this as an alternative if you would like as well. There are anti-mould sealants as well. So these are silicone sealants that contain a biocide active. So again, ideal for using in bathroom and kitchens where you get a lot of mould growth. And the idea is that the biocide will prevent black mould and can be used in high humidity situations. So again, this is really good to be used where you've got black mould. You can just rake out the old silicone and just put this new one inside. Other methods for reducing condensation, well, you've got your standard methods such as opening windows, even for short periods, will have a massive benefit. If you just had a massive shower, just opening a window after you had it really can reduce the amount of moisture being present in the bathroom. Drying clothes in different rooms, changing to electric cookers, extractor fans, especially if they're correctly sized, and even just trying to keep the trickle vents open. Things that you have to tell your tenants. I know they don't do it, but you still have to tell them, and hopefully they will listen. Most popular now method actually for trying to deal with extracting moisture are dehumidifiers. So a lot of new properties now are quite small and get a lot of moisture. So what you can use is a dehumidifier. So we have one at Safeguard which is a dehumidifier and also an air purifier as well. So it extracts moisture from the air, and it's got the air purifier, which is a HEPA filter to remove dust, pollen from the air. So it's very popular for sort of like small properties. So what you can do with these dehumidifiers now is have things called laundry mode. And the idea is that you put it on laundry mode, it turns on for 6 hours, and you put your laundry next to it, close all the doors, and it should dry the laundry back to, almost dry, really. I use it in my flat, and it's great. And the idea is it's got a 2.2 litre tank, so the idea is that you just turn it on, leave it for 6 hours, and your laundry generally will feel almost dry. And it's much more efficient than using a tumble dryer, which costs, in terms of energy per pence, it's better to use a dehumidifier now. So when it comes to ventilation systems, they're a great way of extracting moisture. So outdoor air typically has a lower humidity than indoor air for most of the year. So what you can do is you can try and replace the moist air using different types of vents. You've got your passive vents, such as your air bricks and trickle vents, and then you've got your actual extractor fans. So you've got your bathroom extractor fans, for instance. So we have one at Safeguard, and then you've got your PIV fans. And has anyone got a PIV fan? So a few you have. So basically these are little loft units that you put in your loft, and the idea is that it pushes air from your loft into the dwelling below. So the idea is that it should replace the moist air within the property. So you only need to put one fan in the property. So this is what it looks like. So you basically install it in the loft, and it basically has one vent here, which should then push dry air into the property. So you make sure you have lots of little trickle vents throughout the property to then basically displace all the moist air. So again, these are quite good now because you only just need to install one fan. And if you are a bit of a DIYer, in theory, you could try and install that yourself, and all you've got to do is just get an electrician in just to do, install the actual, wiring, basically. And then the other way is to increase the surface temperature. So any form of insulation is a good way of increasing the surface temperature to stop mould and condensation. But Sometimes a lot of recommendations are to put, 100 mil or, your Kingspan, which, fair enough if you're trying to reach a certain EPC. But if you're looking just to stop condensation, just using sort of thin insulation such as this can be enough to stop condensation. So this is one of the products we call Ultratherm. So this is 12 mil insulating tiles, which are great for stopping condensation. So this can be stuck directly onto the wall with a simple adhesive, and then it can be plastered directly onto. And because it's so thin, it means that you don't need to do much remodelling around windows. That's where a lot of the costs come to when it comes to getting insulation installed, is that you install the insulation, but you have to then get the windows redone, you've got to get the doors redone. That just adds so much extra cost. Whereas this, because it's so thin, you actually can put that on, and hopefully you won't have to have extra costs of remodelling everything.
Michael?
Yes?
Can you cut it then?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is cuttable quite easily. So this is just a small piece I've just cut from the actual main thing. So they're 1 metre by 0.5 metre. And like I say, you just simply stick them on, and then you can pass directly onto them. Okay, so that's condensation and mould. So let's have a look at penetrating damp. So it's been a really wet day today, so I hope you might see a few of you guys come back to a bit of a wet property actually. So what is that? So that is where moisture enters through the property, through the roofs and the walls, especially when you've got any gaps or defects in the masonry. And where there's high wind-driven rain, that's where you can get real bad damp problems. The main problem there is where you've got single skin walls, cavity walls, where you've got wall ties, and also where insulation has been installed in the cavities as well. It can be a big issue when it comes to penetrating damp. So what are the main symptoms when you're looking out for penetrating damp? You're looking for damp patches, especially when they're high up off the wall, and if they're on the first floor as well, you pretty much can guarantee it's penetrating damp. Paint blistering, so moisture is obviously coming in from the outside, so you'll get moisture filling up in the behind the paint, and that'll start to blister. Circular spotting, quite common when you've got wall ties or you've got plasterboard, you've got cold bridging. So that you put plasterboard on the wall, and the dabs have become wet, and it transfers moisture through into the plasterboard, and you've now got cold spots which allow mould to grow on those dabs. So what are the main causes of the penetrating damp? Well, blocked and leaking gutters is a classic one, and it's not always apparent until when it's raining. So when it is raining, it's sometimes worth just going outside and having a look at the gutters and seeing, are they working? Because it's the only time really you can tell if they actually are doing their job. Defective pointing, so where you've got masonry, where you've got lots of little cracks in the masonry, that will degrade over time. So that just simply needs to be repaired. You can use sort of ready-made sort of, putty to fill that in. And make sure when it comes to the finish, you need to use flush or bucket handle, because that gives you the best rain resistance. Holes in walls, if they're left in place where you've had a satellite, or even when they come to install the satellite, they have to draw a hole and secure their ladder, and then they take the ladder away and then leave the hole in place. So that just needs to be filled in. And defective window and door seals, so around windows, that can cause, especially when you've got high wind-driven rain, moisture can get in there. Most sealants around doors and around windows only last about 10 years when it comes to sort of silicone sealants, so they do need to be replaced sort of every 10 years really. And spalling brickwork, where the face of the brick has blown from freeze-thaw action, and it's exposed the inner face of the brick, which is highly water absorbent and allows even more moisture to come in through the masonry. And then porous masonry, so it's quite unbelievable. If you take a standard sort of red brick and submerge it in water, it will take up about 20% in its weight in moisture. They are highly absorbent in moisture, so the benefit of that is that in theory, if they become wet, they then dry out, so they're nice and breathable. But if you get heavy rain periods, such as, I think this winter could be a heavy rain period to be honest, then that moisture can build up and build up, not allowed to dry out, and eventually the moisture then appears on the inside face of the property. So what are the main products for dealing with penetrating damp? Well, one of the main products we sell at Safeguard, one of our biggest sellers, especially during a rainy season, is storm dry masonry cream. And basically what it is, it's a water repellent cream for external walls. So you paint it on the outside of your property, on the external brickwork, and it's basically a silane siloxane emulsion cream. It looks, a bit like you're painting yogurt on the outside of your house, really. But it's just a one-coat application, and the idea is that the cream penetrates into the brickwork, and then you get a deep penetration. You create this hydrophobic zone, which then gives this penetration of moisture through wind-driven rain. So this has been tested by the BBA, so that's the British Board of Agrimont, and they basically tested it where they did this like weatherometer testing, and they found that after their testing, they found that storm dry would be beneficial and would last a minimum of 25 years from one coat application. So the idea is that you paint it on the brickwork and it doesn't leave a finish, so it's a transparent coating, so you wouldn't know it's there basically. So you can apply it by brush, roller, or even spray it. So you can sort of see it's sort of that yogurt sort of consistency, and you just paint it onto the brickwork. So it only goes on the brickwork, you can't paint it onto a painted surface. It can go onto render though, if you have got render. And basically what it does, you can sort of see it slowly soaks into the brickwork, and after 12 to 24 hours, the brickwork should return to its normal colour. You may get a slight bit of darkening during the first sort of few days, but that will fade very quickly. And then very quickly, it should become water resistant after about 1 to 2 hours, but you'll get full surface beading effect about 28 days. If you've got any of those holes or gaps in your masonry, you can use this. This is a ready-made sort of gun-applied mortar, so this is called XR mortar. And basically what it does, it's ideal for sort of patch repairs on your masonry external work, so it can be used for brick, stone or concrete, and the idea is it's got good adhesion, and it sort of sets within about 4 hours. So the idea basically is that you've got this sort of hole in your brickwork, you clean out any dust, wet down the surface, and then basically just pipe this mortar into your hole, fill it in, and then what it does, as it dries, it then changes colour. So you can sort of see there, it goes from this sort of light colour straight into this dark colour. If you have got a particular colour that you don't want to match, what I recommend is basically find a bit of it, of the, like if you wanted to say there's a hole in the brick, what you can do is get a bit of brick dust and then just rub that onto the surface to match it in. That's quite an easy way of doing that while the mortar's still wet. So that's just a few products there for dealing with penetrating damp. And now we're on to the final one, which is rising damp. So what is it? What's rising damp? It's always the one that seems to be a bit of a myth, but basically it's the vertical movement of moisture through the capillary structure of the masonry. And the idea is it comes through what's called capillary action. So there's lots of little capillaries in your brickwork, and the idea is that the moisture basically rises up through those capillaries and those pores if it's in contact, basically. So the masonry sort of acts like a wick, and what it does also is that in the ground there's lots of these ground salts, and they are soluble in the moisture, and as the moisture rises up through the bricks, it also brings up these ground salts as well, and they're deposited in a salt band. And you might see that happen when you dry out. So this is classic case there. So you see that where you've got rising damp and it's created a salt band higher up the wall. You've got tide marks lower down there, and also sort of mouldy skirting board as well. So if you are looking to do sort of measurements of your sort of rising damp, you can use these sort of little moisture meters. So what you do is they little pin probes, you stick it into the wall, and you can take these readings into the brickwork. So what you're looking for rising damp is high readings, and then a southern cut-off point, which might be in line with a salt band if there is one, but that's what you're looking for in terms of a moisture profile when it comes to rising damp. So yes, that's our little moisture meter that we sell. So it's an electrical conductive meter, and it's used for measuring the moisture levels in the wall. Try to use it as a reference because the actual numbers they give, so the idea is actually these meters are calibrated for wood, but you can use them as a reference. So what you do is you go along the wall and you take lots of little readings across the whole wall and you see where the higher levels are. It won't give you an exact number, what the actual number is, but it'll tell you if there are higher levels of moisture in certain sections. If you actually want to know what the levels of moisture in the wall, what you have to do actually is dig into the wall and take out samples and then dry them in the oven and see what the weight loss is, and that'll tell you actually what the moisture levels are. But again, it's not very practical really, but if you want to know that, you can do that, and at Safeguard we do testing of plaster samples to determine what the moisture levels are of different bits of brickwork. So what are the main treatments for rising damp? Well, some of you might have already seen this product already, so that is the dry rod, which is a damp proofing rod. So basically, it's now seen as the most effective rising damp treatment on the market, and the idea is that this rod is soaked in a silane active chemical, so this is normally wet, and the idea is that you drill into the brickwork, and then you push the rod into the hole, and basically the active chemical spreads through the masonry to form a hydrophobic damp-proof course. Why it's beneficial to use the rod? Well, you don't need to have any sort of mastic guns or any clever equipment. You simply just drill the hole and just push the rod into the hole, and then you plug the hole afterwards and then do your finish. So this has improved performance above any cream or liquid, and it's been again approved by the BBA for the lifetime of the building if installed correctly. And it's also been tested by the German equivalent, and basically they tested it in a wall that was 95% saturated, and it still reduced the rising damp in that wall. So again, like I say, you just simply push the rod in. We also do have another product on the market, which is our legacy product called Dry Zone Cream. Same idea. It is a damp-proofing cream based on silane siloxane, and again, same idea. You drill your holes and you inject a cream into the wall. So there are situations where it might be useful to use a cream over the rods, where say you've got a very thick wall, and so it's really hard to push the rods into the thick wall because they get stuck. So you can just inject the cream and then just inject until you've filled each hole. Again, performance is very useful, so it's water-based cream, it's safe to use, and again, it's been tested by all these different test houses across Europe as well. So it's one of the most tested rising damp treatments out there. So again, that comes in this 310ml cartridge and 600ml sausages, again available through any of those outlets I described. So how do you do remedial DBC if you want to do it yourself? You drill holes into your mortar course, and then you can use what's called a hole clearing tool to get rid of any of that debris, because if there's any debris, then that's going to reduce the amount of capacity of material you're going to be able to get in there, and then you just inject your DPC treatment. So if you're a fairly keen DIYer, it's not the trickiest thing to be able to do, really. So you can still see there, you inject the treatment in day one, it sort of sits there, and then within the sort of first 2 weeks, the active chemical starts to spread and will join up with the other holes. So the holes are about 12 centimetres between each hole, and after about 28 days, you should then have a chemical damp-proof course. Such as that. So that should now be resisting any moisture coming up through the ground. So now you've done the damp-proof course, what do you do afterwards? How are you going to replaster the wall so that you, get a nice finish and you stop any other forms of dampness as well? Well, you can. So why do you do that? Why do you hack off the old plaster? The reason is because this plaster now is basically salt contaminated. So ground salts have accumulated within the plaster, and basically these are hygroscopic salts. And what happens is, say I just hacked off the bottom section there and installed my damp-proof course, and then just put the skirting board back in front and went, okay, I'm done, thank God. What's going to happen is all these salts within the wall are going to continue attracting moisture. They're going to continue becoming damp patches, and you're going to have to go back again and fix it properly. So that's why when you come to it, it is beneficial to hack off this salt-contaminated plaster. So what can you use? What sort of products out there? So there's renovation plasters. So these are sort of like your wet plasters that you apply onto the wall, a bit like gypsum, but this is a cementitious renovation plaster. So this is lightweight, it's breathable, hydrophobic, and also ready, effectively just add water and off you go. So any sort of experienced plaster will know how to use this really. So again, you can sort of see in this diagram, you install your damp-proof course, in the wall, and then you apply 2 coats of the plaster, and then you can apply your skin coat, and then you can apply, say, a mold-resistant paint on top to prevent any, if there's any condensation issues. But the idea is that these plasters are lightweight, which means they create a warm surface, so you should also have a reduced condensation as well. So I'd always recommend using renovation plasters over sand and cement, because sand and cement, even though it blocks rising damp and damp through the wall, it creates a cold surface, which can then create condensation. Another method is to use a plasterboard system. So we have one which is like our fast plasterboard system. Very simple again. You've got your DPC, installed, and basically what you do is you apply a primer cream to the internal brickwork, which is called Dry Shield, and then you use an adhesive called Dry Grip. So this is a moisture and salt-resistant adhesive, and basically you stick the plasterboard on, sort of like golf ball-sized blobs onto the plasterboard, and you stick it on. And because it's moisture and salt resistant, you won't get any sort of transfer of moisture through the plasterboard. And because you're putting plasterboard on, you'll create a cavity gap, which then allows the wall to dry out. So if you've got a really wet wall, it's really beneficial to allow the wall to dry out as much as you can. So So again, it's a plasterboard based system, so it's breathable and time efficient. So again, this system, we're using these two products, again, has been BBA approved as a great method for dealing with replastering after rising damp. And it's great for any sort of tenanted properties because, you know, any sort of, you know, contractor can get in there, hack off the old plaster or old boards and stick this on, skim it, and be out there basically within a day and a half, really. Sometimes in the same day if they're lucky. Let's say there's a problem where you can't work out where the damp's coming from. It's a really old house, Victorian. It's got loads of different flues. You've got window. You're like, oh my God, where is this moisture coming from? It's going to cost me loads. What you can use is a membrane system. So this is something called dry-base flex, and this is a two-component. Basically, what you do is you hack off the old plaster. Again, install your DPC. I always recommend installing a DPC because basically, if you don't, you're still allowing moisture to get into the wall. And if you do that, it becomes less thermally efficient and you allow more heat transfer through the wall, so you're going to have more heat loss, and that actually makes you have a colder wall. But this method is basically you stick on a dry-base flex adhesive, so that's a cementitious adhesive, and then basically you stick on this membrane, which is like a fleece membrane, stick it on the wall, and then you can plaster directly onto that, and you can actually even use gypsum plaster for that, so it's quite a nice fix actually, which that can be done in sort of like 2 days in terms of a job. So it can be applied on the damp substrates. There's no need for any plugs or drilling or penetration of the membrane, and it's great for any around chimneys, so we get hygroscopic salts and damp around there. Really useful. Okay, so that's nearly it, guys. I'm just going to quickly wrap up the conclusion, and I'll take some questions. So when it comes to dealing with any damp problems, key thing is to take your time with diagnosing damp, because it might not always be apparent what type of damp you're dealing with. So it's really important that if you get a contractor around, to, you know, ask them to take your time. That's why you use things such as data loggers, hygrometers. Just try and work out what is the damp you're actually dealing with, because otherwise you'll spend all this money and then you'll, you know, a few weeks' time they'll say the damp's back. You think, oh God, not again. So it really is important to try and take your time. So for dealing with mould, though, key thing I would take away from this presentation is basically clean off the mould using that sort of dry zone mould kit, repaint using anti-mould paint, or you can use, like say, this anti-mould additive as well. And especially using in combination with dehumidifiers. Dehumidifiers now are seen as a real benchmark now for dealing with condensation. And then when you can, try to deal with the underlying damp in a fast and efficient manner. So when it comes to any of those sorts of, you know, problems, just come to us and hopefully we have those solutions. So I'll just very quickly just say, so Safeguard, so this is our website here, and if you have any questions, you can email us at info@safeguardeurope.com, or you can call us on this phone number. And like I say, I work in the laboratory, but we've got a whole technical team who basically will take any sort of questions, whether you've got a, you know, small, you know, damp problem or a massive problem. We'll be able to either, you can send in pictures and we can then diagnose it, or we can even put you in touch with trusted contractors that have basically been on training courses that we've done. So they now know how to use our products, they're safe on actually what the damps are, and we are, you know, like I say, nationally, we have contractors all over the country who can come to your property and will hopefully diagnose the damp for you. Okay, that's me.
Does anybody have any questions now?
Is the external cream okay for listed buildings?
Yeah, no, we've had it used on older properties, that is fine. There are some, when it comes to listed properties, where you might need to get some the conservation officers like permission, but we have had it used on some old churches and properties in England, so yeah, that's fine.
Dare I ask, how competitive are you compared to, as regards pricing against competitors?
Well, we try to, well, depends, because there are many other like damp-proofing creams on the market, but like I say, you can come to us and we do trade prices, and sometimes if you go to, for instance, if you buy through Wix, for instance, they have this thing called Trade Pro, that's what it's called, that's it, and actually you get 10% discount. So for instance, the PIV fan, I think that costs £500, so if you buy it through Wix, you get £50 off instantly. So, you know, it can be beneficial, or you can come through us and, like I say, if you're someone who's going to be doing lots of properties, I reckon we can do some good price for some of our products.
Any others? Yeah. Oh.
Not all mould is bad though, right?
Not always, no. Like I say, if you've got mould, it's usually black mould, that's the issue.
So as a landlord, how can you tell whether your mould is going to cause potentially harm to somebody or it's completely harmless?
Well, my rule of thumb is if there's any mould, you should deal with it, because basically, with Alba's law coming into it, and also a decent home standard, which will eventually come into effect with, like, you know, hazard, because basically it's part of the decent home standard as well. There's a thing called category 1 hazards, and basically damp and mould counts as one of them anyway. So when it comes to that, you technically should deal with the mould anyway. But basically, because we get people come to us saying, can you test this mould for us? But to be honest, there's almost no point. If you have mould, you just clean it away, and that's that really.
Okay. The second point is, we've been doing this a long time. 99.9% of the time, in my experience, is down to the user error on the tenant side. Obviously, we try to educate them. Sometimes it doesn't work very well. This legislation is going to be a bit of a nightmare for landlords with tenants who don't manage their condensation very well, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. So this is where essentially you guys will have to try your best to educate your tenants. So that's where sort of things like these sort of brochures are quite useful to keep in the homes, for something for them to read. And that's where basically, if it was me, if I was a landlord, I'd make sure I had, for instance, controls on the sort of temperatures and making sure that they can't really turn off the thermostat if that's possible. I don't know what legislation actually is on that, because there might be a bit of data protection there. There you go, leave on it. But I would recommend, for instance, having a dehumidifier in any of these properties, because essentially they can be left on. You can put data loggers in there so you can monitor the actual sort of moisture levels as well. And then, to be honest, if I had a property that had quite a bit of mould and condensation, my things I would do, I would use an anti-mould paint, so that'd be great, that should stop the mould. I would use some form of fan system, such as a PID fan or extractor fan, and then I would use a dehumidifier and probably, well, some form of, like, if you are looking to try and stop it, maybe some form of like thin insulation such as this, as like, you know, solutions really.
Thank you.
No.
Hi, just want to double check. I don't know whether you mentioned or whether I have missed that. When you insert these rods to the wall,
yeah.
How long the wall will stay damp? Is it like 10 years or is it 15 years, or after a certain time you need to redo it again?
In theory, so let's say you've got a wall that's completely saturated, it's completely soaked. What I would recommend, basically, is hack off the old plaster, install the dry rods, and try and leave it to dry just for a week or so to allow as much moisture to dry out. And then I'd install your sort of damp-proof system, such as like a renovation plaster or cavity wall system. But we've had people who have had completely soaking walls, installed it, like the rods or the cream, and put the plasterboard system or plastering system, and sort of had no real damp issues, apart from a little bit damp during the first sort of week or two. But normally it will start to dry out very quickly. The rule of thumb is, if you've got a 9-inch wall and it's completely saturated with moisture, it takes about 9 months for it to dry out. It's like, an inch per month is the best way to think of it. Once you've installed the DPC, that's a nice way to think of it. What I'd always recommend is try to leave the wall unpainted for as long as possible. If you paint it, you're going to reduce evaporation, and so it'll take longer to dry out. So it's really important. That's why sometimes it can be beneficial. So we actually do sell a white skim. So instead of your standard gypsum multi-finish, which is like that pink colour, you can get this white skim, which can be the finish, but then you don't have to paint it because it's white. So then you can leave that as the finish for a couple of months, and then if they want to paint it, they can do after a few months, but at least they've got a white finish, and it looks quite clean, and it allows the wall to dry out. So that could be something you can do as well.
Does it last forever?
What you mean, this sort of treatment?
Yeah.
Well, in theory, yeah. If you make note, because it's a chemical bond to the masonry, so that basically this sort of silane active will react with the siliceous material within the masonry. So that's why you always do it into the which you call pointing. And basically, there's lime, cement, you've got sand, and the idea is the silane will react with them and form a chemical bond. And in theory, because it's got a high active content, it will then form this very strong bond, and it should last, in theory, the lifetime of the building, unless there's changes happening within the other sides of the building which can increase the amount of moisture. Because the best way to think of rising damp is it's a bit like a seesaw. You've got capillary moisture on one side, and you've got evaporation on the other side. So if you decrease the evaporation, that will increase the capillary moisture. So it's just things like that. So if you have a wall which doesn't have rising damp, and then you put thick, non-breathable insulation on the wall, you might then find you're having rising damp, because basically you've stopped evaporation now, and so the moisture is going up. So that's why it's beneficial when you do install insulation check the damp proof course, because if it's not working, then you might find you get rising damp in the future. So it's really important to do that.
Just need to use the mic, otherwise we won't pick you up.
The brick cream you talked about, does that have to go on dry bricks? Or?
No, you can go on to, well, when I say wet bricks, make sure it's not raining, basically. So if I was doing it, where is that? It's quite far back, isn't it? But basically, you simply apply, you wait for like a dry day. Yeah, so basically what you do is you'd wait for a dry day, really, and apply the cream onto the brickwork, and it should soak in within 24 hours. Just make sure it's not going to rain after you applied it, otherwise it will wash away. So it's just like standard like painting rules, really. So just make sure you apply it, and that's it, really. But it can go onto wet bricks that have just been, wet, basically. That's fine as well.
So how do you deal with the tenants who, even after you provided the dehumidifier, they won't turn it on because it uses electricity, or they won't empty the tank because they don't know how to do it, or even if you train them, they won't.
I don't know what you can do about like twisting their arm, really. It's very tricky. I mean, like I say, we try and develop all different solutions and safeguards so that, like I say, that's why I recommend, say, like a fan system. So like that PIV fan might be beneficial because that's in the loft, it can't really get to it, and that will continually push dry air into the thing, so that could be something that could be beneficial instead. So a PIV fan or an extractor fan that's attached or something like that.
What will the running costs of that be through your experience?
I don't actually know, if I'm honest, because my colleague Simon knows. He's literally the one who knows all about it. But if you want to know about it, I'll try and see if I can find it on our thing, or give us a call and give you the information.
Thank you so much. I think we've reached the end of our evening now and we need to close. We're a little bit over time. That was no, not at all, Michael. It was an extremely comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. Just a final reminder. Just a final reminder, if you can complete our feedback questionnaire, it's so helpful to us and it does help us plan future events. And lastly from me, thank you so much to both our speakers this evening. Thank you to you all for your kind attention, your helpful questions, and I hope it's been a really useful evening for you all.